I'm Nick Armstrong, and you're watching Dear Fort Collins, a podcast featuring the people that make Fort Collins a wonderful place to live. This series of episodes is all about the election that's happening in November 2025. And we're interviewing all of the different candidates for mayor, city council, and PSD school board. And we want to hear from them in their own words about why they're running, what they care about, and you then can be more informed about who you're voting for when it's time to fill out your ballot. With ranked choice voting, it's really difficult to know sometimes who your candidates are and what order you're going to rank them in. So I hope these series of episodes really help you figure out which candidates best align with your interests and needs. And as we do these interviews, I want you to know that I have given the candidates access to the questions in advance. I try to ask all of the candidates the same questions, or at least give them an opportunity to answer the same questions in the same kind of way. And there's very minimal editing on any of these episodes. So unless there was an errant sneeze or a cat jumping on someone's lap, you're hearing from the candidates in their own words. I do have a quick disclaimer to give you that I serve on the Parks and Recreation Board for the city of Fort Collins, and my opinions on this show are my own. They're not the position of the board or of the city. And I have also advised a number of the candidates about their campaigns, and in some cases have either helped with their campaigns or made a donation here or there. I do my absolute best to make sure that they all get fair treatment, that there aren't any favorites being played, and that also we're asking them the same types of questions and they have an opportunity to answer those in kind. I hope that you enjoy these episodes and that they help you become a more informed voter in the upcoming election. And if you do have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know and reach out on the Dear Fort Collins website. I'm always happy to hear from you. And some of the questions that you'll hear me ask of the candidates have been submitted by listeners and watchers just like you. Folks who are fans of the show and want to know more about particular candidates and their positions on particular things. So with that, let's get on with the show. On this episode of Dear Fort Collins, we have Susan Gutowsky, who's running for a seat in District 1, my district. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate your inviting me on. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
You know what? The last time, we talk a lot, but the last time that we were together in this kind of capacity was we were running against each other.
We were.
And you know what? We managed to keep it civil and fun, and I hope that today's the same. I don't think that we're going to throw any barbs or elbows today, right?
Absolutely. Remember, kindness is the word.
That's right.
It always works.
It is, and it's good for Fort Collins, I think, too. Even in the era of RCV, it's become sort of like you kind of have to be nice to get the votes for everybody. But like in general, like Fort Collins has been a pretty nice place to talk with each other and run against each other and just compare and contrast ideas.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I've noticed, too, is that I've been busy with city council, but you've been busy with myriad other things that have contributed to the community. So, yeah, I appreciate that, too, especially Comic-Con most recently.
Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for coming to Comic-Con to check it out.
Oh my gosh, it was a feast for my eyes. I'll tell you, I walked in and it was an adventure immediately. I even adopted.
You got a tribble.
Yes, I know. Isn't that funny?
You got to watch out for those. They multiply.
Well, I was promised that they don't. So and so forth. So far, he's been pretty good. But
he's been neutered.
He's neutered.
Just a reminder: spay and neuter your pets. That's the.
I love it. Well, anyway, he's a great addition to my menagerie that I have in my office. So I'm glad that I was there. It was a great treat. So thanks for doing that every year. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being there. Susan, tell us about your campaign, why you decided to run.
Okay, well, it's my 6th year. I'm finishing my 6th year, so I have served for 6 years. It's a heck of a lot of fun. People question that. My neighbors don't quite understand when I say that it's a lot of fun. But I said, service is, and it's an adventure. There's always something interesting going on. But I've always, ever since I was little, I've always been volunteering or, doing whatever it was that was service oriented, went into teaching because it was helping kids and that kind of thing. And so it's always, I think it's part of my DNA. And being on city council has kind of fulfilled that. It goes a little ways back, and I can give a bit of history in terms of of what I've done. I was teaching with PSD for 26 years, and then finally retired. Went on to sub at Kennard for another 6 years because I just couldn't leave it behind, and I really enjoyed the teaching part of it. Went on to school board for another almost 8 years. And so there was beginning to be a pattern about service. And when the opportunity to be appointed came about, I thought, that would be another level going from school district and then into the city to continue my service. And I really enjoyed it for the last 6 years and looking forward to four more because there's a lot of things ahead of us. We're heading into some really troubled times as a nation. It's going to impact us as a city, and I want to use my experience to be on board to deal with those issues and just help the community. So I'm that's why I'm doing this.
What do you see as the biggest challenge that Fort Collins is going to be facing in the next 4 years?
Wow, there's so many of them. Of course, the housing affordability is something that's impacting everybody across the nation. But I think the biggest challenge is going to be keeping everybody sustained, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to pay their bills, to stay sheltered, to have jobs, raise their families. When we're talking about housing affordability, it's actually living affordability and just managing to stay afloat. There's so many people that I'm seeing are facing hardships. I'm on the board for the what is it? Family. Oh, now I'm just going blank. But family housing, working with that board because families, in addition to singles, are they're just having a hard time making it, and I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing that we're going to be faced with, in addition to any other things that are going on. But we can go on further about things that I would love to accomplish in the next 4 years. But I think that's what we're faced with. The uncertainty with the school district about whether they're getting funding to feed the kids, to do preschools and things of that sort. There's just myriad problems that are going to be facing our community. And I think as a municipal government, I know that a lot of it falls to the county, but I think as a municipal government, we have a lot that we can do to make sure that we just keep people sustained.
So knowing that city council can sort of set its own priorities and sometimes they're wide spanning and just a few, can you share a specific project or issue that you'd like to advocate first for if elected?
Yeah, I really am interested in moving northeast. That's District 1, and right now I think that's the area that needs the most attention. Creating that connectivity, trails, streets, intersections. One of these days, I do believe that if they can solve the water problem, Montava will be a reality, and I think we are going to have development up there. But there's also, including yourself, our folks and the northern reaches of the city, much of it in District 1, are looking for that connectivity to make sure that we get our trails and roads up there. I'm really interested in working on our Northeast Park. We've taken care of the Southeast, and we're going to have a pool and a library and all that good stuff and a park. But I think the Northeast really, really needs attention in terms of creating a park, maybe even a bike park up there. And just getting that finished. I think that's the unfinished portion of our city right now, and the part that needs the most attention. And that falls to me as the advocate, for District 1 to get that rolling. So I see that as a really high priority for myself.
So speaking specifically about Montava, getting the water off the ground has been a significant challenge for that
Mhm.
project. And knowing that a lot of the limiting factor for infrastructure that you've discussed, like the roads, bike lanes, parks, other things like that, is that development has to pay for its own way.
Right.
How will you balance those needs of a lacking infrastructure for one of Fort Collins' most rapidly growing areas,
Mhm.
and knowing that the development has yet to occur for a large portion of that space,
Right.
while there are still neighbors that can't, frankly, get to their kids to school without a car.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, just to continue to advocate, I think that not enough attention has been paid to that. We just finished with our CCPI recommendation for funding, and although it's going to be like 10 years before we look at it again, I think that as much as I can do to allocate money in that direction to continue the attention toward the northeast part of our community, I will be doing my job. I'm only one person, one person of seven, but I think the advocacy is going to be extremely important. And a lot of it has to do with as far as Montava is concerned, with them being able to get the water that they need so that they can put shovels in the ground and actually start. It's going to take a long time. The idea of um, of having a grocery store and having a little, city center, a 15-minute city, as some of my colleagues refer to, it's going to take years and years. But we have to focus on that, and I don't believe that the focus has necessarily been on our part of the community.
Related to that, knowing that the strategic trails plan that was just approved by City Council, it indicated a 45-year build out, and that areas of Northeast Fort Collins were prioritized. CCIP, as you mentioned, is a possible funding mechanism for some of that. GOCO, another funding mechanism, the lottery funding that we get from the state. What other sorts of advocacy do you see are helpful in this space to bringing attention to the portions of District 1 that have been for years ignored, other than maybe the LeMay overpass, which created some unintentional consequences for other areas of Fort Collins?
Hmm. Well, the idea that there's should be another overpass coming, which would be really helpful. Um, well, I guess I'm not understanding completely what you mean about what other kinds of advocacy other than advocating.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, knowing that the city is not alone in its efforts, there's also the county, there's other entities that are operating in this space, and really the roads and the intersectionality of the trails and the even the ditches, in many cases, impact where things can happen and flow
right.
through this space. So we've seen Larimer County with the Country Club Road Corridor study,
Hmm.
and they indicated that they lacked funding for it. They ran a ballot measure for it, but there were
Yeah.
so many roads that were just like county road number, blah, 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 county road number 6, county road number 12. And
Right.
folks in the city don't necessarily know, even though they live in the county, they don't necessarily know, like, well, what is County Road 6 and why do I care about a bridge that seems to be failing or whatever?
Right.
Whereas the folks who live along Vine are saying, well, that's known as Death Bridge to our neighbors, and we can't ride our bikes past there at night because at 40 miles an hour, nobody can see you, and there's also no bike lane. So uh, I think that when we talk about advocacy, are there particular levers of education or outreach or other things like that just to get some of these things, these processes moving? Because we've heard from constituents who came to speak at City Council 2 weeks ago about pulling money away from CCIP, putting it into affordable housing without really any clear metrics for what that would be, accounting for, and knowing that we have a ton of pressure and a ton of different commitments in our community that we have to pull these levers for. Which specific ones do you see will be most advantageous for folks throughout District 1 as you work from your council seat?
Well, considering that a number of areas within District 1 are county, or within the GMA, but not within the city limits and all, I think an awareness, making people aware that those areas are out there and what their needs are. I think what you're saying, the idea of education would be helpful. But I also think pressing for and advocating for county measures, like their tax to improve the roads and all. It broke my heart that of all the things that passed this past election cycle, that the county one did not. because I think that it's been too long neglected, and they can't function without the money. And so I've been a strong advocate for that. So I think that would be one of the things, is to help the county do what they do, which in turn helps us.
The city has climate goals and
Right.
sustainability goals. Do you see those as in opposition to pushing for more affordable housing and also some of this growth and things that we're knowing that Montava's primary struggle is also water? Do you see that
Right.
those issues are in opposition?
No, I don't see it. Are you talking with the county as well, or
Well,
just
and
the values?
specifically to, yeah, as for you as a city council member, do you see that that is an issue of uh, either honoring the sustainability and climate action goals or honoring the, growth in some more affordable housing?
No, I see them all working together. No, I don't see them in opposition at all. Um, I did want to talk about. Well, there's other things I know that you wanted to know, but I do want to address the issue of affordable housing, because I think people toss that term around without a definition to what affordable housing is. I'll share what my definition is, and also I want to say too that affordable housing is a huge issue and concern within our community. But I also think, as I've said before, that affordability is the thing that I'm looking more at, because I'm looking at affordability as maintaining shelter and managing to stay sheltered, whether it be homeless or whether it be just anybody in our community. The affordable housing piece, I think, has been confused with, I don't even know whether confused is the right thing. When I say affordable housing, I say housing for marginalized, vulnerable communities of people who otherwise couldn't afford to live somewhere. So that means partnerships. It takes a village type of looking at building housing for marginalized people. That's what I consider affordable housing. What I'm seeing is the idea is that build, 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 density will create affordability. And I haven't seen a whole lot of affordable houses or condos or any type of living spaces that have come from that type of development. Because I do think that as a developer, they need to have partners. They need to have all sorts of different funding measures. If you look at Hartside Hill, for example, they just had their ribbon cutting the other day, and what an example of partnerships building housing that are truly affordable, AMI qualified, that type of thing. I think I would love to build 30% AMI qualified housing. It's more 60 and 80, but those are the things that's affordable housing. But it's not that easy to build. It takes a lot of effort. It takes state contribution. It takes tax credits. It takes the amount of money to, once you get into your apartment or whatever it is, to then help to lower your rent even further so that you can actually pay your rent and all the other bills too. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's different than we're going to go and scrape a house and put up a sixplex, and then that's going to be a place where a lot of people can live affordably, because I don't think that they can.
Do you see specific levers that the city has access to? I know we've talked a lot about the land development code and some of these
Mhm.
things that come down the pipeline. What are other mechanisms, or is specifically code change that you're looking to advocate for from the city side to ensure that the affordable housing that you're describing, specifically for disadvantaged communities, can be constructed?
Yeah, well, land banking really helps. I think that the city can provide, because a lot of the building of affordable housing has to do with whether you can acquire the land cheaply. In the case of Hartside Hill, the church, participating in providing the land for that. I think the city land banking and then providing cheaper housing for affordability for, say, the housing catalyst to come in, care housing to come in and do their partnerships. I think that that's a good start, because that's what makes it expensive. Let me give you an example of an issue that's come up where the desire for affordable housing, to my mind, may not fit, and that's the issue that we've had over putting affordable housing on the parking lot at Oak Street and Remington. There's an example of an interference of affordable housing with perhaps the ability of businesses to do what they need to do, and that's to sell their products to people who are parking in the downtown, and that's created a conflict. So what do we do, though? We look at maybe another property that could be, and this is where DDA comes in to assist in looking at perhaps another property where they could weave their magic and create a partnership with Housing Catalyst, keep the parking lot so that it can be utilized for the businesses, so they're vibrant and the affordable housing happens. But it just can't be anywhere, you know. And so, that's where I'm looking at it. It takes a village, and in that case, in that particular case, it would take DDA and what they could do to partner with Housing Catalyst, but not necessarily on that particular spot. So, I love the idea of affordable housing. I really do. But I think that there are certain places where, for one thing, I don't think that I would want to live in back of all the bars in an alley, that once was what was once an alley. I would love to live maybe on Remington Street, like Oak 140. And because I think that there's more dignity in that. If you're living in affordable housing, you want it to look like everybody else's housing, like the villages that have been constructed around town, where it's like really pretty and really nice and affordable. But we have to be selective about where we put it.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding the distinction properly. The affordable housing that you want to see is the one specifically that a category of housing specifically for disadvantaged communities.
Mm-hmm.
The A lot of the folks that are pushing for affordable housing right now are asking for, on behalf of like teachers, service,
Mm-hmm.
minimum wage workers who live in and around Fort Collins or want to be able to live in and around Fort Collins and provide the services. Where do you see is there an intersection between your idea for affordable housing and that particular category,
Mm-hmm.
or are you looking for that type of comprehensive solution to start with the disadvantaged communities and then grow beyond that to serve the more service-based population?
No, in fact, the people that you mentioned, teachers, I mean, I was a teacher, didn't go into it for the money. The teachers can qualify for this kind of housing that I'm talking about. It's not, no, it's not a poverty issue. It's a not enough income issue to afford the housing that's available. We're talking about a housing crisis, and I don't know that we have a housing crisis. I don't see a lot of people other than our identified homeless population living on the street. So I think it's an affordability crisis. I think that's what we're in, and I think that the housing that I'm talking about building, I think would be and will be affordable to the teachers, to the mid-range earners in our community. So I don't think that it excludes them. I think it's for them. It's just very difficult for a developer to come in and all by themselves without the assistance of partnerships to create anything that people can afford. I think it's attainable, maybe, but it certainly doesn't fit within their budget. The other thing too is that the Urban Renewal Authority too has been working on or facilitating a middle income housing project over across from the Murphy Center, and that's another type of housing where people can actually afford to buy it. But the housing that I've seen around town, I don't see it as being affordable for the average wage earner. So I don't know whether that's answering your question at all, but
It does,
that's
yeah. I think that distinction is really important. The idea of how do we create attainable housing for folks who are just trying to do their jobs and also live close to where they want to work, live, and play is a really interesting thing. So, talking about specifically affordability and the idea of sales tax being a primary driver for a lot of the city's funding to be able to do and provide services and hire folks. What do you see as the role of city in helping to create a more business-friendly environment in Fort Collins?
well, for one thing, by and we have businesses all over town, but I wanted to focus more on Old Town since that's the jewel of Fort Collins, and it's the destination point and so forth. And I think it's to make it easy, and I can't help with the rents. That's the problem. These a lot of the businesses are in buildings that are owned by landlords who are going to set their own rent rates. But I think that we can, through providing adequate parking for the businesses, I think, and enabling people to go there and find a place where they can, as they say, store their car while they're doing their shopping, I think is immensely helpful for the businesses and the restaurants. Trying to think of, I think it's just the ease in availability for the businesses so that they can continue with their sales. Yeah, because if we don't provide for that, then we don't get the revenue that we need in order to run the city. And so I'm extremely pro-business in that sense. And the other thing too, I just wanted to mention about businesses and the reason why I'm sensitive to their needs. I think about the fact that when I was working, not retired, but working, and I would go to work and I would work for the school district and they would pay me and paid my bills. I look at these small businesses and that's what they do for a living. They go there and they do their they run their businesses, and that's what they base their income on in order to raise their families and pay their bills. And I just think that it's vitally important that we support our small businesses, the larger industries also. I'm not saying that, but I'm looking at our mom and pop and enable them to thrive and sustain themselves, because it's good for the city and it's good for them. The last thing we want is for them to fail.
Yeah. 68% of the small businesses in northern Colorado are 9 or fewer employees. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's it's a vital part of our we see a lot about like, oh, let's get the next HP, let's get the next AMD. We don't see a lot about, well, how do we support Salis? How do we support Happy Luckies? These folks that are in Old Town. So talking about quality of life, we've talked a little bit about dignity, placement of housing, and things like that. What role do you think that the city should play in supporting the arts and nonprofits, especially programs and organizations that aren't officially part of the city's initiatives?
Mm-hmm. Well, for one thing, I believe that art is it's crucial I consider the vitality of a community largely related to the arts that they support, whether it be art, whether it be music. There's just all sorts of different forms of it, but I think that it's essential. And we do have that. We do have the Fort Fund and so forth, where we support the arts in that way. But I would just love to see us find ways to get artists back on the streets like we used to have. What was the program? I'm trying to think. I always forget what it was, but where we can get musicians, for example, on street corners playing like right outside of Austin's and entertaining, where we can see, other than painting our pianos and transformer boxes, where we could see people for perhaps just creating their art on the street where it can be appreciated. I think it enriches the community. How we can do that as far as the funding of it, I don't know, but I know that I wanted to press for that because I really miss that, having them there this is a crazy idea too, but I really like the idea. The other night at a council meeting, there was a young lady who came up and to speak, and she was talking about that she would love a place where graffiti was welcome, where it wasn't considered a bad thing, where it wasn't painted over. And I mentioned that night, I said, you know what? When I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was a place for that. There was a tunnel, and we walked through the tunnel, and the messages that were presented there, it was just an opportunity for expression. And then after a while, they tell people we're going to paint over it and it's going to be a blank canvas again. And then they start over. And I said, I would love for us to have something like that. I mean, we have beautiful murals. It's amazing the amount of art expression that we have, and we utilize our buildings and our walls and so forth. But I thought this would be a really cool idea that she brought up. Well, that's art. And that's self-expression and all. So I was charmed by her idea, and I would love to see that. But the music, the art, the beauty, it just enhances the quality of a community. So yeah, I would love to promote that.
Yeah, and that's one of the programs that we see in Denver is that they do have dedicated graffiti walls and things like that. And where they have seen a benefit of this on the more official murals that are part of the city, if somebody who's new to the community comes in and tags on top of it, the community for the graffiti artists is coming together and saying like, no, don't do, this is not the place for that. Let us show you, and they bring them closer into the community.
Yeah, I love the idea.
A self-corrective action in that space.
Yeah. Give them a place to do it. We see it as the trains go by. We see beautiful artwork. Have you seen that? The creativity, it's amazing.
We've talked a little bit about the needs of disadvantaged communities. Can you tell me about your understanding around the needs of the LGBTQIA plus residents and their visitors?
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you, my granddaughter is gay. She's part of the LGBTQ community in Bend, Oregon. Came out when she was a junior, and it never changed a thing. When she came out to us, I think she was fearful. What would we think? And of course, I mean, it didn't change her, and we love her as much as we always have. Point being that she has managed to keep me current, to help me understand. I have started though since I was very young, and it was part of our culture. I grew up in a Hispanic home. So, yeah, talk about people who sometimes are the object of people's prejudice and so forth. Grew to be very sensitive about that. And I'm accepting of everyone. I've always said, I think that we ought to just let people live their lives without judging, just leave them alone. And Carson has helped me with that. But the other thing I think is that we need to educate ourselves. It's nice to have an LGBTQ member of your family, but we need to educate ourselves to the needs of the community. But her comment was, and I say the same thing. She wants a safe space, just like everybody else in the world. She doesn't want to be different. She doesn't want to be treated different. She doesn't understand why they need protection. Nobody should need protection unless they're in war, perhaps. But that idea of how do we protect our LGBTQ people, that shouldn't even be the case. Transgender, I mean, my goodness, the warfare that's going on right now against our transgender population, feeling unsafe. And it's growing, sadly, due to our current administration, should not be the case. There isn't anybody in Fort Collins or in any other community that needs protection, and so I just advocate for LGBTQ and any other, and I know there's others, IA plus. To be just themselves. In Poudre School District, I know it's been an issue, And we just need to be more educated, not even tolerant, accepting of everybody in our community.
Do you see a role the city has to play in any of the like advocacy or educational elements that you've discussed?
Oh no, absolutely. One of the things that, well, I think it starts with demonstrating an acceptance, from every council member, um, uh, because just demonstrate that the acceptance of everybody in our community, but also promoting the workshops that have been going on, training of community members, promoting those so that we can bring people along and they can understand, about inclusion, about diversity, all those things that right now are in our universities and so forth are being, the attempt is to diminish that. And I think as city council that we can fight against that and make sure that it's not diminished in our community, whether it be at the university or in our schools or in just everyday life within Fort Collins. Yeah, it's incumbent upon us as the leaders to do that. Sure.
So this is switching gears a little bit.
Mhm.
Our first major election using ranked choice voting in Fort Collins is upon us. How do you plan to appeal to voters who may not choose you as their first choice? And in particular, we're in District 1, where this is, you've got three different candidates. We've got a number of different mayoral candidates. And how are you planning to make yourself known to the voters who might be backing another candidate?
Well, we're reaching out to any number of voters, not anybody specific. But I think one of the things I'm nervous about rank voting because it's such an unknown, and I don't know what the outcome's going to be. But one thing that I've always believed, and I think I said it before, is that I think kindness rules. It always comes out the victor. And one of the things that rank voting is doing is it's forcing us as candidates to be nice to each other because the negativity is going to kill a candidate in rank voting. We just need to show our positives and what we're going to do for the community rather than attacking our opponent and showing that they're not good. And so that's been my focus. So when I'm showing the things that I stand for and what my beliefs are, I really do believe that somewhere out there, there's going to be people who are going to align with me. I mean, not totally. So if I'm not their first choice, I'm hoping that we align enough that I'll be their second choice. And that's how I just think it's going to be a natural appeal. I don't think I need to try really hard. I just think that by being kind, by being honest, by being sincere, authentic, and having some really great ideas, that I will either align with first choice people or second choice people, and then it's like a pinball machine, and then and so it goes, and then we see how it turns out. But I don't see it as a difficult thing.
Are there any voter groups or views that you're intentionally not seeking to be courted with or associated with?
Not specifically, but I think if I were to categorize, I would say that any group that takes away people's rights, that tries to stifle their, as I've said before, their opportunity to just live their life without judgment and without prohibitions and all. I don't have any specific ones, but those are the ones. However, they exist in our community. And even though I'm not associating with them as their council member, I will be representing them. And so, I look at them as the whole body of the representation that I'll have.
So can you speak to that a little bit? I know that there was during the last election, Alexander Adams had been flagged as somebody who had started a hate group during his
Hmm.
time at CSU.
Hmm.
And in the process of that coming to light, there were a number of different interviews where you had said, "Hey, let's back off of Alexander or whatever else." Can you talk about your position on that and how you feel that relates to the larger body politic in Fort Collins?
Right. Yeah. And Alexander has since, I understand, left the community because of the negativity that he experienced as a result of this of running. I want to backtrack just a little bit. When I met him, I wasn't aware of that. That of what his background was. When he shared that with me, my educator experience kicked in. And since I had been teaching for the longest time, I ran into a lot of kids, and still do know them, who had experienced difficult times, got into stuff that wasn't great, um, and have since had an opportunity to see how that was a period in their life that they backed out of and changed how they lived their life, and became and have become uh, really wonderful citizens, wonderful people. Having raised kids myself, I wouldn't say that they got into really bad things, but just being a parent, and you are too, that there's being a parent humbles you, because there are so many experiences that you have that train you to believe that people, I think, are inherently good. And so that I'm not sure that everybody would agree with me, and that people change, and that people move on to be really, really good people. I think that's what happened with Alexander, and that's what I believed, and I expressed that too at the time, that I believed that he had seen, I guess, the error of his ways, whatever the case was, and had become a different person, and was pursuing a different path toward leadership. And whether people agreed with me or not, it's what I believe. And it was because, as an educator, I had seen it over and over and over again.
So to be clear, uh, your feel on Alexander was that he had disavowed the white supremacy groups and things that he had started, and had made efforts to amends on that.
That was my understanding. Yes.
Okay. As we talk about running for office, and
Hmm.
that they're all folks who run for office, all different political stripes. The race itself is nonpartisan, but these issues do crop up from time to time, where we have candidates who are accused of sexism, who are accused of harassment, who are accused of any number of different things. In this case, we had a candidate who had been affiliated with a white supremacy group,
Right.
um, and I don't believe that as a community we've really reckoned with a lot of the fallout from some of those things. Like, we can see it easily, like our community doesn't align with those values. We can see that in the vote totals. Like when the returns came back, like very clearly was soundly defeated. The my question is for you, as a candidate who is in the race, knowing that there were other candidates who had come out and done this, and that there was some kerfuffle back and forth between elected officials at that point to say like, hey, this and that and the other thing. What is your feel for us overall as a community for how we address and deal with those issues where a candidate has come, some issue has come to light that is on the whole damaging to Fort Collins community and isn't representative of the will of our community? As you said, kindness rules. How do we prove that as candidates who are in this space as trusted elected officials, to say like, these are inherently disqualifying processes, that if you step up with a white supremacy background, or if you step up with sexism, harassment, any of this stuff, that these are disqualifying qualifications for you. You cannot be a part of our elected body.
Wow, that's a tough one. I don't know how to answer that. I have to tell you. I This was an isolated situation, and I think we're spending a lot of time on it. There were so many other things I wanted to share with you about what I believe, and I didn't realize that we were going to take this direction and spend so much time on this, because it was an issue that I thought was in the past, and something that I very much believed. I believed in a person, like I always do. I always see all the goodness in people and not the negativity. And I'm not sure how to answer the question about, you know, as you're asking about candidates and races and so forth, because there's so much else I wanted to tell you about who I am and what I believe and where I want to what I'd like to do for Fort Collins. You had a lot of really good questions. Maybe we could kind of redirect into that. I
Yeah,
don't
and this
know.
is not meant to be by
That's
any
up to
means
you.
a gotcha question. What it is meant to be is, I think that there's a discussion about, as we get into ranked choice voting, that there are things that do happen from time to time that folks are, stringently opposed to, or stringently agreement with, and it's a question of how do we handle that as a body? And because I don't think that we've ever really cohesively addressed what happened with Alexander as a community, not just we covered it in newspaper or whatever else. And that as an issue has not really been cohesively delved into. You yourself have brought up a number of different things in protection and support and service of the Latino community. And so
Mhm.
I was curious, from your perspective, how you sort of drew that line. And it sounds to me as if you had put that as uh, you know, you chalked it up to youthful inexperience on Alexander's part.
I did. Right. And so I did. I don't know what else to say. I just believe in people, and I believe that people change, and I believe that he did. And I was very, very sorry that he was hung out to dry as he was, with that full page expose in the Coloradoan, focusing on just that and not on who the man was. And I think one of the problems, and I will be honest about that, that the folks who were so critical never met him. They never took the time to have coffee with him and find out who he was and hear his story and let him explain what had happened and why he felt that he was changing and why he wanted to go into a leadership position, and use his experiences in other ways. And I think that was huge. I think if they had taken the time to meet him personally, rather than just criticizing him in a horrible way, they would have found that he was a pretty nice guy and that he had some great ideas, and that he, if given the chance, probably would have been a good council member. But they never did. And so I would say that I think that as human beings, we owe it to one another to know people personally, face to face, and not stand behind a poison pen, a poison Facebook, whatever the case is, or a full page article, without having an opportunity to know. I hope that you would agree that it makes a real big difference when you know somebody. Standing behind an email, where you can just hit a button and boom, it's out there, but you haven't had a chance to actually talk to the person. I wonder sometimes if the things that we say about people, we would say if we were right there standing next to them looking eye to eye. I don't think so. I think that there's a lot to be said about knowing somebody.
One of the benefits of this medium of podcasting is that we get the chance to ask those types of questions and hear from the candidates themselves what they're feeling and thinking through. And it oftentimes cannot be boiled down to a simple soundbite one way or the other. A lot of the
Mm-mm.
issues are, as you said, complex considerations. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, what does Fort Collins mean to you?
Well, Fort Collins is the town that we came to. Actually, I've lived here 46 years. We came here because in California we were teachers, and they passed Proposition 13, which froze the property taxes and literally froze us out of a job. And we came here to make a new life, and we've been here ever since. And it's been the town that has embraced our family as our children have grown up, and it's been the place that we've called home. And I'm terribly in love with the city. I'm terribly devoted to the city, and that's why I've run for office, actually, because I wanted to give back to the city that's given so much to me. So Fort Collins is everything. I would never, ever move. When we travel, we come back and we go, oh, we're so glad we live here because it's a wonderful place. Obviously, a lot of other people consider it wonderful too. That's why we're growing, but it's definitely a destination place for people to visit. It's incredible.
What would voters be surprised to learn about you? And if you don't have anything off the top of your head, what was your weirdest job?
Well, I wouldn't say my weirdest job. I would say what people would be um, surprised to know about me is that that I grew up in inner city Los Angeles. That I lived with my mom, who was she's my hero. She's no longer with me, but she's my hero. She raised me. We were so poor, barely making ends meet. I lived actually in a boarding house with other girls because the moms, and then my mom roomed with several moms because they couldn't afford to keep us all in apartments with them. So I lived in a boarding house and I saw her once a week, which was very, very hard. I missed her desperately, but I was well cared for. Mrs. Walker, she fed us oatmeal with butter and brown sugar on top every morning, took us to church on Sunday. And so she was the person that I lived with while my mom worked. So barely put food on the table. So I would say that poverty is a lived experience for me. And I think people would be surprised to know that I had such humble beginnings. When you look at the fact that I tend to fight for the underdog, for the underheard and the underserved, that's why, because I have felt it. And I know what it's like to have so very little. My mom, as a Hispanic woman, knew what it was like to be denied jobs because she was a Garcia. And on the other hand, though, our Hispanic culture is so rich. We sing, we play the guitar. I would never, ever trade growing up with my Hispanic family in California. But the poverty was grinding. It really was. And I bring that with me to my service to the community.
If you could have any superpower to help your community, what would it be?
Actually, it would be to bring harmony back to Fort Collins. One of the things that I've experienced, especially over the last couple of years, is a lot of discord, a lot of unhappiness, angst. I could use any number of words. The agony that we went through during our time fighting over the land use codes, fighting over U+2, fighting over what we're going to do with Hughes when initially people voted, over 65% of the voters voted to say what we wanted to do with Hughes. And then city council said, well, what should we do with Hughes? That creates dissension with people who said what they wanted to do with it, and then to be told that that's not what they're going to do with it. And now we have a battle over an ordinance that's going to be passed after the Civic Assembly and then put on the ballot to compete with the people who really would like to have an open space. Dissension, a lot of it. The issue over the parking lot, and are we going to build affordable housing? There's this feeling of a lack of connection with our city council right now, I think, that's caused a tremendous amount of concern. The trash situation, people who don't feel that they should be paying an opt-out fee for a service that they're not receiving. Rightly so. There's just so much dissension. There's a lack of harmony. And if I had a superpower, that's what I would do. I would want to bring us back into alignment, into harmony, where we're not fighting with one another, where there's just peace. When you look at what's happening nationally, and the things that are happening where people are feeling unsafe and unappreciated and disrespected and so forth, I want our community, and that's again the reason why I'm running. I want our community to be cohesive. I want people to feel happy and safe and at peace and prosperous and all of those things. And the superpower would be to bring that back to Fort Collins. I think we're out of alignment. I think we're fractured. And I would love to bring it back.
Can we dig into your response on the civic assembly process just a smidge?
Mhm.
Um, Knowing that the ballot language for Hughes was written in such a way that it included things like um, open spaces, parks, recreation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It had very specific language that
Yep.
outlined this myriad of things which had been written by the general public and overwhelmingly approved
Hmm.
in favor of through the vote. Um, my question is, do you feel like the civic assembly process got us further away from the intent, or did you feel like it was a clarification on what folks who were not used to writing ballot language ended up putting into the ballot and creating this myriad of things that could possibly happen
Hmm.
without any sort of guidelines on how to scope any of those particular bits?
Yeah. Um, where to begin? I think that, well, first of all, and I said this, that I didn't think that it was necessary to allocate $150,000 to get consultants to bring people in to tell us what we needed to do with a property that had already been designated. But I think what tripped us up, and not us, as I guess as council, what tripped up the process was the way the ballot initiative was written. It said parks, and there is a very, very vocal group of participants in our community who want a bike park. They're dedicated bikers, and they want a place where they can compete, and they want a Valmont that exists in Boulder. That became the park. That became the definition of park, where I think initially it was meant, very, very soft touch uses. This is not a soft touch. This is a disruptive addition to this property, which is very peaceful and up against the natural areas and so forth. So I think that was the start of it, and they are a very, very vocal minority in our community, and led by a very, very vocal person who's quite vibrant. And so it created this need to bring a group of people together to decide what it is that we were going to do with this property. Um, I think the fact that we had a bike park feasibility study that happened prior to setting up the civic assembly, to me, tainted the process, because I think subliminally it was out there that, what would you like to do with it? By the way, we have a bike park feasibility study, and that you might want to consider, but maybe not. And and so it went. And I really admire the people who were selected, who participated, because I don't think they knew the other things that were going on, and they honestly looked at all of the presentations and everything and came up with their recommendations. Bike Park didn't even make the cut. It was 47%, and yet it still ended up being part of the recommendations. So my view on it, and I've stated this before, is that I think that the process was flawed, and I appreciate the work that was done, but I don't think that it was what our city needed to do. Our council, when you have four votes, you can do anything you want, and I think that the four votes guided that. Voices like mine were dismissed, and so it went, and now here we are, another fracture point in our community.
Just to be clear, the findings from the final report are available publicly online.
Mhm.
The unanimous support elements were indigenous use and minimize light pollution.
Mhm.
And as you have mentioned, the idea of a bike park ended up in the not passing the supermajority which had 47% of support. So it doesn't seem to me as if the final conclusion, and even in the bike park feasibility report that you're citing, I remember that there were a number of different like nebulous clouds of
Little brown
spaces.
cloud.
Yeah, of places. Hughes was one of those. And I wonder about, you know, I wonder about the consequences of talking about a civic assembly process like this, which was purposefully built to connect and find a representative portion of the community.
Hmm.
Um, and from end to end, the selectants were, psychographically, demographically, economically, like spread across the entire representative of what should be a body of Fort Collins residents. Um, and so I wonder about, do you feel like it wasn't truly representative of the process? Do you feel like there was other elements that went into it that weren't that in the final recommendation that went to city council that something had shifted or that it wasn't representative of the final report, which is publicly available?
I think it wasn't representative of what the civic assembly did, because they were charged with deciding what they wanted to do, and anything that met the supermajority was what they decided to do, and anything that didn't come in with the supermajority was not going to be considered. But in talking and visiting and so forth, and looking at drawings and so forth, they decided, well, what they really did intend to do the bike park, and so it got added. And I think that was inappropriate, because if we truly wanted them to decide, numbers are numbers, and it didn't make the cut. So why is it now part of the recommendation? And this
Yeah.
was the thing that I question. I think that there was a flaw in the process. I think if they just processed their report, numbers are numbers, we would have not had the bike park there.
Yeah. And looking at the final report, it looks as if the multi-use, which had an 89% support from the participants,
Hmm.
which includes the definition of this of combination of bike park, open spaces, natural
Hmm.
area, trails.
Sure.
It's very closely tied to the ballot language,
Right.
whereas the specific instance, which did not pass the bike majority, it said bike park portion of the property and then continued on from that portion. So I I think that there's some follow-up necessary maybe from the city council to say like, hey, what's happening in this space?
Hmm.
Because uh, as you said, discord is not healthy for the community. And the feel from my position back in the day when we were doing this the first time of the Save
Sure.
Hughes initiative,
Hmm.
and this ballot language being thrown out there. We know as a community based on what the Hughes report has given us. The land was undevelopable. The infrastructure is not there to expand the roadways. It is not a developable parcel in the way that CSU had described, which is
Yeah, exactly.
affordable housing for students and staff and a bus transit corridor and all these the amazing things that were like, let's put this all right here.
Yes.
It was never going to happen, and it was $7 million away from bare dirt. So the red herring in my mind, the fracture point for all of us as a community, has been that element of the red herring that was placed in front of the land as market value
Mhm.
of if fully developed in the method that we are describing would have had a price tag of X, which we paid as taxpayers
Right.
to CSU to procure the land,
Hmm.
which has deleterious effects on things like our general fund, the natural areas fund, and now we're paying the price in the budget. So I really I think that if we point back to a particular element, that fraction of our community occurred from the town and gown standpoint and then perpetuated itself into these little microcosmos fractures of, well, do we put a bike park on it or do we do these other things? And um, I think in the same way as we've done studies for other things, the Hughes, feasibility study, the bike park feasibility study, pickleball feasibility studies,
Hmm.
um, we do these things as a community because we need to know and how to scope where to minimize harms because any institution with a near $1 billion budget is going to do some harms. Down to the LeMay overpass and its impacts of pollution and sound on those neighborhoods that are right there in Tres
Right.
Colones.
Yeah.
So we know that there's going to be harms. We know that there's benefits, and so I wonder if there's as you say, a pathway to educate voters away from those recurring harms that happen just as a result of being fractured and having misinformation.
Hmm. Well, I think in this particular case, I think that those people who voted initially, the over 65%, they're still out there. And they still have their expectations that they had before. And I think that's what's causing the fracturing right now because we have council that's saying, no, this is what we need to do. And again, there's too much telling and not enough listening. We were supposedly have two ears and one mouth so that we could listen twice as much as we talk. And I think that's the problem here. Am I against bike parks? Lord, no. I think it's a fabulous idea. There are 9 possibilities in the feasibility study that show places that we could put it up in the Northeast Park that I was talking about initially. But I just don't think that it goes there. And I think that there was a lot of fabrication to make sure that got there. It's causing a lot of dissension. I mean, it truly is. I would love to see us have one. And we've even allocated money toward a bike park, but we just still have to decide where it's going to be. And I'm not sure that there is where it's going to be. However, it's going to go on the ballot. And so it might be that, well, it's going to be, the ordinance will be passed because we have at least 4 votes who want it. And then it'll go on the ballot and perhaps it'll become what happens, and then that's it, then we won't have it up in the Northeast where it should be, where we could develop it into our park. But I don't know whether that answers the question that you were asking for, but I do know that has been a lot of that going on in our community. And I think that there are people who have not been represented. And I think that's why we have so much sadness and angst and a desire to get back on the track,
Shifting gears a little bit, who do you consider a role model in public service, and what have you learned from them?
Well, my aunt who has passed since then, but she was a school board. She ran for school board for a couple of terms, several terms, in fact, and she lived in Napa Valley or Napa, and she ran for school board, and I was so impressed with that. That she was on she was elected for one thing. I mean, when I have to share with you that when I first ran for office and it was school board, when that ballot came out, and you might have had the same feeling when you ran, when that ballot came out and it had my name on there, and I thought somebody's going to mark my name. Can you imagine? I was just overwhelmed. Well, when I knew that she was running for school board, and then she won again, and the work that she did and how much she loved it, that's what inspired me. And she is absolutely my hero in terms of service to the community. And so the rest is history because then I ran for school board too, and then city council. But yeah, she definitely is. She's outstanding.
Is there a piece of advice that you've received and didn't follow, and now you wish you had?
Well, advice to myself, I think, was that I should have been a lawyer. The advice that I didn't get was what I did get, but it wasn't that, was from my parents who said, you really should, and it was back in my generation, but you really should become a teacher because that way you'll have summers off and you'll have time with your kids and all of those things. And my dad was a teacher too. So, my daughter became a teacher. So, I mean, it's kind of a generational type of thing. But that I kind of want to flip it and say the advice that I was given was the advice that I took. And in retrospect, maybe wished I had a very fulfilling career, never regret it. But I always wanted to be an attorney. And but anyway, what was kind of funny is that our son went to law school. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to his studies and so forth. So I guess I could flip that. I took the recommendation of my parents because I was very compliant and had a very fulfilling career. But I always thought, sure would have been fun, to go to law school. But anyway, vicariously, I enjoyed it through him.
What do you think Fort Collins is going to look like in 20 years from now?
Wow, I hope it looks as nice as it is and is as nice as it is, except just a little bigger. Because I hope that we grow, as I've said. I hope we grow gracefully, mindfully, and that we provide for everyone in our community. To have the opportunity to be prosperous. And so I think, if we do it well, I think that we'll see Fort Collins very similar to what we have today. I always say, look at the leadership that we've had so far, and I always say that I stand on the shoulders of exceptional leaders, who have created the community in the Fort Collins that we have today. And I'm hoping that I'll be part of that for the next 4 years, and other leaders in the next 20 years will keep us as we are, super quality community.
Susan, we've reached the part of the interview where it's rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and
Okay.
whatever's on the top of your head is just fine. So, favorite coffee shop?
The Cart.
Favorite brewery?
Oh, definitely Odell's.
Favorite park?
Edora. I live right by it.
Horsetooth hike or a Pooter Trail bike ride?
Both.
On the same day, no less.
On the same day, of course.
Favorite book?
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Wonderful book. Can't remember the
trying to get
author,
a hold
though.
of you, a phone call, email, or text?
Phone call. I love the one-on-one.
Would you consider yourself an early bird or a night owl?
Definitely a night owl, but an early bird also. I just don't get enough sleep.
Your favorite nonprofit in town?
Project Smile.
Tell us about what they do.
They provide free dental care to elementary, well, actually, PSD students and I think Thompson. But anyway, the key is free dental care combined with Lions Club that provide free vision care for vulnerable populations.
If you had one word to describe Fort Collins, what would it be?
Vibrant.
One thing you could change about Fort Collins if you could just snap your fingers and make it different?
I can't think of anything because I love it so much. I wish I could come up with an answer, but I don't know. It's like your kids. What would you change in your kids? Nothing, because they're already perfect, right?
If you weren't running for office, what would you be doing this year?
I would be working the elections. I love that. I worked before I started with what is this? What am I running for city council? I was an election judge and sometimes an election supervisor, and I loved it. And when I finish with my work, hopefully 4 years from now, I will go back to doing that.
Is there anything else that you'd like a listener to know about you or your campaign?
Well, all sorts of things, but probably I think the key that I would like listeners to know about me is that I have been doing this work for 6 years. And I think with the things that are going on in our community, the challenges that we're going to be facing, and just the relationship that I have with the community and the people that I've met and that I serve, I think that experience matters. We're just going to need experience. We're going to need that institutional knowledge that will really help us make the right decisions and so forth. And so I would say, the count on the experience. I'd like to lean on that. And also remember that when you're voting, vote for me, number one. And check out my website because listeners, if you'll go to Susan-Gutowsky.org, it'll take you to my website and you'll find out everything that you need to know about me. Because we weren't able to touch on a lot of the things that I would love to accomplish in the next 4 years, and so many other things that we weren't able to talk about, but maybe they'll find that out by going to the website.
Awesome. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast, and hopefully it was fun.
It was challenging. That's what I would say.
Would be Dear Fort Collins if it wasn't just a little bit challenging, I guess.
I know, that's for sure. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity to visit with you. I hope that as people watch that they'll enjoy what they hear and find it interesting and learn a little bit more about me.
That's the goal, always. Susan, thanks so much, and can't wait to see you again on Dear Fort Collins.